Chapter 7 of The Lady Macbeth of the mzinsk district by Nikolai Leskov. Katerina Lvovna had scarcely had time to blow out her candle and to lie down on the soft feather bed, quite undressed, before sleep overpowered her. She was so tired after playing and diverting herself that she slept soundly. Even her legs and arms slept. But again, as if in a dream, she heard the door open, and again the cat jumped with great agility onto the bed. "Really, it is a punishment to have this cat always here," reflected Katerina Lvovna wearily. "I locked the door on purpose with my own hands. The window is shut too, and here he is again. I will turn him out directly," said Katerina Lvovna, trying to get up. But her sleepy arms and legs would not obey her, and the cat crept over her and mewed so strangely that it sounded again as if it was uttering human speech. A cold shiver passed over Katerina Lvovna's whole body. "No," thought she, "there is nothing else to be done. Tomorrow I must certainly get some consecrated water and sprinkle the bed with it, because this is a most mysterious cat that is always coming to me." But the cat purred and mewed close to her ear, stuck its muzzle into it, and said, "What sort of a cat am I? Why should I be a cat? You, Katerina Lvovna, very wisely think that I am not a cat. I am really the well-known merchant, Boris Timofeich. I am only feeling bad now because all my inside has been split, owing to the treat my daughter-in-law gave me. That is why I mew. I have grown small in size and appear like a cat to those who little think who I really am. How are you, Katerina Lvovna, and what sort of a life are you living with us? How faithfully do you keep your vow? I have come from the churchyard on purpose to see how you and Sergei Philippich are warming your husband's bed. It's all dark. You can play about. I see nothing. Don't be afraid of me. You see, your treat has made my eyes rot away. Look at my eyes, my little friend. Don't be afraid." Katerina Lvovna glanced at him and shrieked at the top of her voice. Between her and Sergei, the cat was lying, and its head was the full-sized head of Boris Timofeich, just as he had been as a corpse, only instead of eyes, fiery circles whirled round and round in every direction. Sergei awoke and comforted Katerina Lvovna, and again fell asleep, but for her sleep had departed, and it was well too that it had. She lay with open eyes, when suddenly she seemed to hear a sound, as if someone had climbed over the gate and was in the yard. The dogs began to bark, but soon ceased. They were probably being fondled. Another minute passed, and she heard the key turn in the iron lock, and the door open. "Either I am dreaming, or my Zinovey Borisich has returned, because the door has been opened with his latch-key," thought Katerina Lvovna, and hastily nudged Sergei. "Listen, Sergei," said she, raising herself on her elbow and listening attentively. Someone was really coming up the stairs, carefully placing his feet on the steps and approaching the locked door of the bedroom. Katerina Lvovna hurriedly sprang out of bed in only her nightdress and opened the window. At the same moment Sergei, barefooted, jumped out into the gallery, and his legs clasped the column by which he had many times descended from the mistress's bedroom. "No, don't! Lie down here. Don't go far," whispered Katerina Lvovna, throwing his boots and clothes to him out of the window, and then slipped under the bedclothes again and waited. Sergei obeyed Katerina Lvovna. He did not slide down the column, but hid under a shelf in the gallery. Meanwhile Katerina Lvovna heard her husband come to the door and listen, holding his breath. She could even hear the rapid beating of his jealous heart. But she had no sorrow for him, only an evil laugh seized her. "What's done can't be undone," she thought, smiling and breathing like an innocent child. This lasted for about 10 minutes, But at last Zinovey Borisych got tired of standing on the other side of the door, listening to his wife's breathing in her sleep, so he knocked. "Who is there?" called Katerina Lvovna after a little time, feigning a sleepy voice. "A friend," answered Zinovey Borisych. "Is it you, Zinovey Borisych?" "Of course it's I, as if you don't hear." Katerina Lvovna jumped out of bed, and in her shift, just as she was, let her husband in, and again dived into the warm bed. "It somehow gets cold before dawn," said she, wrapping herself up in the quilt. Zinovey Borisych came in, looked round, said a prayer, lit a candle, and again looked round. "How are you getting on?" he asked his wife. "All right," answered Katerina Lvovna, and sitting up she began putting on a loose cotton blouse. "I'm sure you'd like me to put on the samovar?" she asked. "Oh, don't bother. Call Aksinya and let her do it." Katerina Lvovna slipped her feet into her shoes and ran out of the room. It was more than half an hour before she returned. During that time she had blown the charcoal into a glow in the samovar, and had quickly fluttered up to Sergei in the gallery. "Remain here," she whispered. "How long?" asked Sergei, also in a whisper. "Oh, how stupid you are! Stay here till I call you." And Katerina Lvovna hid him again in the same place. From where he was in the gallery, Sergei could hear everything that happened in the bedroom. He heard the door slam when Katerina Lvovna again went back to her husband. He could hear every word that was said. "What have you been doing all this time?" Zinovey Borisych asked his wife. "I have been getting the samovar to boil," she answered quietly. There was a pause. Sergei could hear Zinovey Borisych hang his coat on the pegs. Then he washed, snorting and splashing the water about. He asked for a towel, and they again began to talk. "Well, how did you come to bury father?" inquired her husband. "He just died and was buried," answered his wife. "What a strange thing it was!" "God only knows," answered Katerina Lvovna, and began to rattle the cups. Zinovey Borisych walked about the room gloomily. "Well, and you? How have you passed your time?" Zinovey Borisych asked his wife. "Our pleasures are known to everybody. We don't go to balls nor to theatres either." "It appears you are not very pleased to see your husband," observed Zinovey Borisych, giving her a sudden glance. "We are not such young things, you and I, that we should go out of our senses when we meet. How am I to show my delight? Here am I, fussing and running about to please you." Katerina Lvovna again went out of the room to fetch the samovar, and again had time to run up to Sergei, nudge him and whisper, "Don't doze, Sergei. Be ready." Sergei could not understand to what all this was to lead, but he waited ready to be called. When Katerina Lvovna returned to the room, Zinovey Borisych was kneeling on the bed, hanging his silver watch and beadwork chain on the wall at the head of the bed. "Katerina Lvovna, why have you made the bed for two when you were alone?" he asked his wife suddenly, as if surprised. "I was always expecting you," Katerina Lvovna answered calmly, looking at him. "Even for that we must thank you humbly. But how did this thing happen to be lying on the feather bed?" Zinovey Borisych lifted Sergei's narrow woolen girdle from the sheet and held it up by the end before his wife's eyes. Katerina Lvovna answered without hesitation, "I found it in the garden and tied my petticoat up with it." "Yes," said Zinovey Borisych, with special emphasis. "We have also heard something about your petticoats." "What have you heard about them?" "About all the fine things you have done." "I have done no fine things." "Well, we shall soon find that out. We shall find out everything," answered Zinovey Borisych, pushing his empty cup towards his wife. Katerina Lvovna remained silent. "We shall bring all your actions to the light, Katerina Lvovna," said Zinovey Borisych after a long pause, frowning at her. "Your Katerina Lvovna is not easily frightened. She is not much afraid of that," she answered. "What's all this?" cried Zinovey Borisych, raising his voice. "Nothing. It's all over," answered his wife. "Well, you just take care. You're getting too talkative." "Why can't I talk?" exclaimed Katerina Lvovna. "You ought to have been more cautious." "I have nothing to be cautious about. Much I care for what long-tongued vipers may have told you. Am I to put up with all sorts of abuse? That's something new." "There are no long tongues, but they know all about your amours." "About which of my amours?" cried Katerina Lvovna, getting angry in earnest. "I know very well which." "If you know, what then? You'd better be a little more explicit." Zinovey Borisych was silent and again pushed his cup towards her. "Apparently you have nothing to say," cried Katerina Lvovna with contempt, angrily throwing a teaspoon on her husband's saucer. "Well, can't you say who has been accused? Who in your eyes is my lover?" "You will hear. No need to hurry so." "Is it about Sergei, perhaps, that they have been lying to you?" "We shall find out. We shall find out, Katerina Lvovna. Nobody can take away our authority over you, and nobody has a right to do so. You yourself will tell us." "Oh, I can't bear it," cried Katerina Lvovna, grinding her teeth, and getting white as a sheet, she suddenly ran out of the room. "Well, there he is," said she a few seconds later, re-entering the room and leading Sergei by the sleeve. "Now you can question him, and me too, about what you know. Perhaps you will hear even more than you want to." Zinovey Borisych became confused. Looking from Sergei, who stood near the door, to his wife, who had calmly sat down on the edge of the bed and folded her arms, he could not understand where all this was leading. "What are you doing, you snake?" he was scarcely able to utter, and did not rise from his armchair. "Question us about what you pretend to know so well," Katerina Lvovna answered audaciously. "You thought to frighten me with your power," continued she, significantly flashing her eyes on him. "That will never happen. But what I know I would do to you, perhaps even before your threats, that I will do." "What does this mean? Get out!" Zinovey Borisych shouted at Sergei. "Make him," said Katerina Lvovna with a sneer. She went quietly to the door, locked it, and putting the key in her pocket, lolled again on the bed. "Now then, Serezhenka, come here, my darling," she said, coaxing the clerk towards her. Sergei shook his curls and boldly sat down near the mistress. "Good Lord! My God! What is this? What are you doing, you savages?" cried Zinovey Borisych, getting livid and rising from his chair. "What? Don't you like it? See here, my bright-eyed falcon. Isn't he a beauty?" Katerina Lvovna laughed and kissed Sergei passionately before her husband's eyes. At that moment she received a deafening blow on her cheek, and Zinovey Borisych hurried to the open window. End of chapter 7.